Welcome back to another episode of Friday Night Frights. Even though it's a Saturday, so it'll be Saturday Scares. Today, we're going to be looking and reading from more from scary stories to tell in the dark. This is collected from folklore and retold by Alvin Schwartz. The drawings by Stephen Gamel. This was the original storybook. Then they came out with the series. A series of 3. But let's get started. Oh, we got to find a good one. Okay. This one is called Alligators. A young woman in town married a man from another part of the country. He was a nice fellow. They got along pretty well together, as you should when you're in a relationship. There was only one problem. Uh-oh, here it comes. Every night he'd go swimming in the river. That's a bit odd. Sometimes he would be gone all night long, and she would complain about how lonely she was. This couple had 2 young sons. As soon as the boys could walk, their father began to teach them how to swim. And when they got to be old enough, he took them swimming in the river at night. Often they would stay there all night long, and the young woman would stay home all by herself. Does not really sound like a good husband. After a while, she began to act in a very strange way. I bet she did. At least, that is what the neighbors said. All the gossiping neighbors. Everybody has a gossiping neighbor. She told them that her husband was turning into an alligator. Really? Your husband turned into an alligator? And that he was trying to turn the boys into alligators. I didn't know about this one. I turned people into vampires. I didn't know there was a guy that turned themselves into alligators. It must have been from G.I. Joe, that Joe Motion guy does. You know, the croc guy, the croc master. I wonder if he eats the alligators. I turned the boys into alligators. Everybody told her that there was nothing wrong with a man teaching his sons how to swim, and there isn't. There's nothing wrong with teaching your boys and girls how to swim. It's actually very nice. It's entertaining to swim, and if you go boating, you fall in the water, you don't drown, and you wear that floaty thing, and you stay above water, but it's good to know how to swim. That's a natural thing to do. And when it came to alligators, they just weren't any nearby. Everybody knew that. Must not have been in Louisiana, and well, it's a vampire capital of the United States, Louisiana. And it must not have been down in California either, or Florida, where the alligators are. Early one morning, a young woman came running into town from the direction of the river. She was soaking wet. She said a big alligator and 2 little alligators pulled her in and tried to get her to eat the raw fish. What's wrong with that? The raw fish is good. I don't mind the sushi. They were her husband and her son, she said, and they wanted her to live with them. But she had gotten away, and her doctor decided that she had lost her mind. Well, they have to go looking for it now after she loses it, don't you think? That way she could be a little more cognitive. And he put her in the hospital for a while. And after that, nobody saw her husband and boys again. They just disappeared. Oh boy, they disappeared. What a shame, what a sad story. But now and then a fisherman would tell about seeing some alligators in that river at night. Usually it was one big alligator and two small alligators, because they are the alligator elevator operator. But people said they were just making it up. Everybody knows there weren't any alligators around. See that nice little artwork by Stephen Gamel? That's a nice alligator. Oh, how sweet. As sweet as alligator. Here's another story. Room for one more. I always have room for one more. A man named Joseph Blackwell came to Philadelphia on a business trip. He stayed with his friends in one big house they owned outside the city. That night they had a good time visiting. Boom, Blackwell went to bed. He didn't vet the bed, he went to bed. He tossed and turned and couldn't sleep. Sometime during the night, he heard a car turn into the driveway. A car turned into a driveway? Wow, this is a good story if your car could turn into a driveway. Now, you drive your driveway after that? Okay. He went to the window to see who was arriving at such a late hour. In the moonlight, he saw a long black hearse filled with people. Oh, this is getting to be interesting. I wonder if I knew them. They drove the hearse. The driver of the hearse looked up at him. When Blackwell saw his queer, hideous face, he shuddered. The driver called to him, "There's room for one more." Then he waited for a minute and two and drove off. And in the morning, Blackwell told his friends what had happened. "You were dreaming," they said. "It must have been," he said. "But it didn't seem like a dream. Must have been a lucid dream at that." After breakfast, he went into Philadelphia, and he spent the day high above the city in one of the new office buildings there. Late in the afternoon, he was waiting for an elevator to come down. It must have been the alligator elevator operator. It went down to the street, but when it arrived, it was very crowded. One of the passengers looked out and called to him, "There is room for one more." He said it was the driver of the hearse. "No thanks," said Blackwell. "I'll get the next one." The doors closed and the elevator started down. Oh, I must have skipped a page. And there was shrieking and screaming and the sound of a crash. The elevator had fallen to the bottom of the shaft. Everyone aboard was killed. There's room for one more. Not that guy. He said, I have no part of this one. No, you go, and it's a good thing because it crashed into the bottom, made a big old mess, and he survived, right? So he got home and said, "Hey, honey, I survived the elevator crash." And she said, "Oh, you want to go to bed? There's room for one more." And he said, no, thank you. And she said, then I want a divorce. Right? Never mind. This one's called the Vindigo. A healthy woman wanted to go hunting in a part of northern Canada where a few people have ever hunted. He traveled into a trading post and tried to find a guide to take him, but no one would do it. It was dangerous, they said. Finally, he found an Indian who needed money badly, and he agreed to take him. And the Indian's name was Defago. They made camp in the snow near a large frozen lake. For 3 days they hunted. They had nothing to show for it. What? You want to go to Canada? You've never been. I've never been to Canada either. I don't have a passport. But I don't think you need a passport. You're ahead of me. You get it? You're ahead of me. Shut up. Let me read the book. They made camp in the snow near a frozen lake. For 3 days they hunted, but they had nothing to show for it. The third night, the windstorm came up. They laid in their tent listening to the wind howling and the trees whipping back and forth. To see the storm better, the hunter opened the tent flap. What he saw startled him. There wasn't a breath of air stirring, and the trees were standing perfectly still. How mysterious. Must have been the Twilight Zone. Yet he could hear the wind howling, and the more he listened, the more it sounded like it was calling Delfago's name. Delfago, it called. Delfago. I must have been losing my mind, the hunter thought. Well, you better go find it. You see the footsteps. That's so nice. The pretty little footsteps. But Defago had gotten out of his sleeping bag. He had huddled in the corner of the tent, his head buried in his arms. What's this all about? The hunter said. It's nothing, Defago said. The wind continued to call him, and Defago became more tense and more restless. Defago, it called. Defago. Suddenly he jumped to his feet and he began to run from the tent. But the hunter grabbed him and wrestled him to the ground. You can't leave me out here, the hunter shouted. The wind called again and broke loose, and he ran into the darkness. The hunter could hear him screaming as he went. Again and again he cried, "Oh, my fiery feet, my burning feet of fire!" Oh, he must have been Lord of the Dance, because they got the feet to flames. Then his voice faded away, and the wind died down. At daybreak, the hunter followed Delfago's tracks in the snow, and they went through the woods, down towards the lake, then went into the ice. And soon he noticed something strange. The steps Delfago had taken got larger and larger. And they were so long, no human being could have taken them. But as something had helped him to hurry away. The hunter followed the tracks out in the middle of the lake, and they disappeared. And at first he thought that Delfago had fallen through the ice, but there wasn't any hole. Then he thought that something had pulled him off the ice and into the sky. That made no sense to him. No, it doesn't make much sense, something coming out the sky, unless it's me as a bat. I come down, I swoop in and steal my victim and fly him away, buy him an ice cream cone and bite them. As he stood wondering what had happened, the wind picked up again, and soon it howled as it had the night before. Then he heard Delfago's voice. It was coming from above. And again he heard Delfago screaming, "My feet are burning, my burning feet." And there was nothing to be seen. Now the hunter wanted to leave as fast as he could. He went back to the camp and packed. But then he left some food for Delfago, and he started out. Weeks later, he reached civilization. The following year, he went back to hunt the area again. He went to the same trading post looking for a guide. The people could not explain what had happened to Delfago that night, but they had not seen him since then. Maybe it was the Wendigo. Wendigo hunting, they get lost. Wendigo shopping, they buy food. You know, that Wendigo. One of them said he laughed. One of them said, and he laughed. Sorry. It's supposed to come with the wind. It drags you along at great speed until your feet are burned away. And more of you than that. Then it carries you into the sky and drops you. It's just a crazy story, but some of the Indians say. A few days later, the hunter was at the trading post again, and an Indian came in and sat by the fire. He had a blanket wrapped around him. He wore his hat so you could not see his face. The hunter thought there was something familiar about him. He walked over and said, "Are you Delfago?" The Indian didn't answer. "Do you know anything about him?" No answer. He began to wonder if something was wrong, if the man needed help, but he couldn't see his face. "Are you all right?" he asked. No answer. This is one rude dude. To get a look at him, he looked at the Indian's hat. Then he screamed. There was nothing under the hat but a pile of ashes. Oh, here's another one. Good artwork here. You see, oh, how pretty that is. Oh, grandma carrying a soup bowl that looks like a head. Oh, grandma soup. Oh, loves grandma soup, you know, especially in the head bowl. You know, she adds a little bit of tripe in there and some brains and eyeballs. Oh, my goodness. Mamma mia, your grandma makes the best head bowl soup around. Oh, you drink that with O positive. That's right. You have to do a short shot of O positive, and that just gives it all the flavor. Pure heaven. So let's get on with the story. This scary story is a scary game that people will play on Halloween. So let's try this. You guys try this on Halloween. But it can be played whenever the spirit moves you. The players sit in a circle in the darkened room and listen to a storyteller describe the rotten remains of a corpse. Each part is passed around for them to feel. In one version, the player is out if he or she screams or gasps with fright. In another version, everyone stays to the end, no matter how scared they get. It sounds like a fun game. Here's the story of a man named Brady. He was bringing you 3 brains of his own. You know that story. Once in the town where a man lived named Brown. It was years ago on this night that he was murdered out of spite. We have here his remains. First, let's feel his brains. Vet and squishy. You use a vet and squishy tomato when you tell the story. You pass it around, and everybody's, well, this is Brown's brain. It's vet and squishy. And now, here are his eyes, still frozen in surprise. You used 2 peeled grapes for that one. Then his nose. Use an old chicken bone. Here's his ear. A dried apricot will work for that one. Now, see, I'm giving you the recipe to play the game. And here in his hand, rotting flesh and bone, a cloth or rubber filled with mud or rubber gloves. Sorry. Oh boy, is that a Freudian slip? A glove or rubber glove, a cloth or rubber glove filled with mud or ice. Oh, that's kind of spooky. But his hair still grows. A handful of corn silk or fur or vet yarn will work for that one. And his heart still beats now and then. A piece of raw liver. I don't like liver, it's an organ meat. It, a lot of cholesterol. It's kind of grainy. Your liver filters toxins. Why you want to eat the liver? I cannot stand the liver. And his blood still flows. Oh, I like this one. Dip your finger in it. It's nice and warm. A bowl of ketchup thinned with warm water will work for that one. And all there is, except for the worms, they are the ones that ate the rest of him. A handful of wet cooked spaghetti noodles will work. See, this is true. This is the recipe to play this game. All right? That was stupid. I'm sorry, guys. The waste of your time with that one, but it's a game that you play called Dead Man's Brains. And you use all these things and you pass it around, and the person who screams loses, and the last man standing wins a prize, I guess. Okay, I guess that would be fun. So, there you have it. Some games and some scary stories from Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark. This picture really bothered me when I was a young boy before I became a vampire. I checked this out at the library. You'll remember, for a younger crowd, the library is a big building full of books. It's not on the computer. You actually have to get a book and read it. I had a very nice library in my castle, filled with leather-bound books, written in many different languages, and they have pictures written, you call cuneiform. But anyway, I'm not going to waste your time no more. I'm sorry it wasn't as scary tonight, but I just do this right off my cuff. I just pull out a story, and like the hook right here, a good story. And the attic, it's another good story. So I'll work harder to find some better stories for you. But remember, Alvin is coming soon. Better buy some candy for the trick-or-treaters. Don't extinguish your pumpkins. Because a little guy named Sam, my next door neighbor, he'll come and he'll mess you up pretty bad. So don't extinguish your pumpkins. Give out good candy for the kids. Be nice. When they say trick or treat, don't play a trick on them. You like reaching into the bag to give them some candy, and you pull more out than you put in, stuff like that. So anyway, here's a quick joke that tells, in the vampire community, how do you know when a vampire has a cold? You could tell by their coughing. That was funny, right? Okay. But anyway, you guys have a fun night, safe night. Remember, be happy and kind, and give out a bunch of candy to everybody. Go to Halloween parties, have fun, be stupid. It's one night a year that you get to be something you're not. Be nice to your puppies and kitties and everything else. So, anyway, I wish you sweet and terrifying dreams in a monstrous way. This is Count Vampire saying, see you, bye-bye. We'll see you in your dreams. And don't think a cross or garlic will scare me away. That's just in the movies. Goodbye for now.